Want to thank our guests for taking the time to be with us. And with that, I'm going to start with our own Congressman Walter Jones. And Congressman, good afternoon.
Lockwood, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here on your show, but also my dear friend from Ohio. As you know, Jim is chairman of the Freedom Caucus, which is a conservative group in Washington. Mm-hmm. I am in the Liberty Caucus. We also are a conservative group, so we do work together on many, many issues, especially the issues of trying to save America before it goes financially broke.
And with that, Congressman Jordan,
good to be with you.
Thank you very much for joining us as well.
Thank you.
I will say that we've got some of our panelists of youth pointers coming in. We'll get to them a little later on, see if we can give them an opportunity to ask a question or two as well as they listen into the conversation. With that said, let me start with you, Congressman Jones, and then we'll go over to Congressman Jordan here in a moment. What's going on in Washington, D.C. in light of the political campaigns and the disruption associated predominantly within the Republican Party, but also in the Democrat Party? The observations are the establishment is losing control, and my question is, who and what is the establishment?
Well, I think the frustration of the American people has been building for the last 4 or 5 years, and the fact that neither party seems to want to address the serious problems facing our nation. And I believe sincerely that the establishment, which has too much influence with policy in Washington because they have the money to buy the influence, has also frustrated the American people. And you can certainly see that with Donald Trump and Ted Cruz and also with Bernie Sanders.
And in the midst of all of this, I'm curious, is Congress able to move? Is there action taking place? We've got things such as the budget concerns. We have issues related to defense appropriations. Are things happening in Washington?
Lockwood, I handed to you a chart that says that America is $19.2 trillion in debt. Mm-hmm. I've been on your show many, many times in the 20 years I've had the privilege to represent the 3rd District. In the year 2000, Bill Clinton leaves office. We have a Republican House, Republican Senate, and the debt in 2000 is 5.9. We have tripled the debt of this country to where we're at 19.2, and if that keeps going, and we hit $21 trillion in debt or $22 trillion in debt, I think you're going to see a financial collapse.
Would you hang the hat on Congress, on the president, or
on both? Listen, okay. if the president, we're the one that funds what he requests. If you saw the Omnibus bill 2 years ago, I can't even remember the amount, probably Jim Jordan does, but then we had the Omnibus bill last year that was $1.1 trillion in budgets, and it's just that nobody in Congress wants to face the fact that we're in trouble. And that's why, again, I'm so pleased that Jim Jordan came to the 3rd District, because he has been outspoken on this issue, along with many of our friends and colleagues, because we are in a situation where it just cannot keep going in this way much longer.
All right. With that, and since you've mentioned it several times, let's get Congressman Jordan on the line with us here. He's in the studio. Congressman, thank you for taking the time to be with us. You're from Ohio.
Yep.
What is the difference, if you will, between the Ohio voters and those of North Carolina voters as you are traveling across the country?
No, the American people are fed up. So you can be fed up with what's happened in Washington and North Carolina just like you can in Ohio. Pat Caddell, actually a Democrat strategist, has important numbers. I had a chance to visit with him a few weeks ago. He said 70, 60, 80. 70% of Americans think the country's in decline. 60% say they're better off than their parents, but their kids are going to be worse off than them. And more importantly, or most importantly, 80% of the American people say, hey, the game is rigged against us. Washington is about big corporate influences, cozying up to big government to get a special deal. The political class, the corporate class, the consultant class, the lobbyist class, it's all rigged for them at the expense of regular middle-class Americans. So they're fed up. And frankly, it's why I'm down here, because there are some people who are willing to go up there and fight against that. People like your Congressman, Walter Jones. And it's why we frankly need to send him back there so we can keep up the fight and stop the crazy spending and actually start to do things that Americans want us to do. I'll give you one simple example. Why in the world should able-bodied people think about our food stamp program? When Obama came into office, President Obama comes in, 17 million Americans on food stamps. Mm-hmm. Too high, but 17 million. Today, you know what the number is? 47 million. A significant number of that 47 million, a significant number of that subset are able-bodied single guys, no dependents. and we don't even require a work component? Are you kidding me? Remember the guy on Fox News a few years ago? The guy who surfs during the day, plays in a rock band at night, and uses your money, Lockwood, for food stamps. It's ridiculous. So all we're saying is let's put in a work requirement like Maine is doing.
I was going to ask you about Maine. Yes.
It's working 80% reduction in just that subgroup, 80% reduction. Now, here's what it does. Here's why it's so important. And here's how we need to communicate it. It's good for all us taxpayers. Treats us with the respect we deserve because, frankly, you shouldn't just give money to someone if they're able-bodied at all. But more importantly, most importantly, it says to those families stuck in a dependency kind of culture and system, we want to give you the tough love help, the incentives, the job training to help. Part of a work program. It doesn't always have to be work. It can be like training and education as well, but you got to be in some kind of requirement to get that help. We want to give you the help to get you to a better position in life. That's how you get on the track to achieving the American dream. So that's one thing we can do to help normal middle-class families who are fed up with Washington. A host of other things like dealing with the debt problem that Walter talked about. But yeah, people, I don't care if you're in Ohio, Hawaii, North Carolina, Texas, you are fed up with Washington, and you are seeing it play out in this election year.
You know, you bring up the issue of, if you will, those free-thinking mavericks in Congress. And by the way, if I'm not mistaken, Mark Meadows is also on the
Good
part
friend
of the
of
Freedom Caucus from North Carolina.
Great guy.
I'm going to go to you, Congressman Jim Jordan, again with us with Congressman Walter Jones. Are we seeing more congressmen willing to buck the leadership and, if you will, the establishment in Washington?
Well, you called us mavericks. I mean, I would say we're just doing what we're doing what we told the voters we're going to do. So I don't know if that makes you a maverick. I think it actually makes you someone who's keeping their word. Sometimes I think we make this job way too hard.
Congressman Jones, though, has been taken to the woodshed on numerous occasions. Congressman Mark Meadows,
we know that feeling.
Mark Meadows, likewise. There's been a period of time that members of the House and Senate, but definitely the House, were very cautious about bucking the Speaker and leadership.
Well, we're at a point in history where you just got to do the right thing. I said earlier today that the biggest thing missing in Washington is discipline. I had an old coach who used to say, discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. And basically that means doing the right thing when you'd rather do the convenient thing. We're at a point with a $19 trillion debt and middle-class families having stagnant wages and this frustration out there. We're at a point where you can't keep doing the same old. Convenience is not going to work anymore. Spending the most bipartisan thing in Washington is you can get bipartisan agreement when it comes to spending someone else's money.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what we got. We're at a point in history where you got to do the tough thing. You got to say, look, we need to fund our defense. And in order to do that, in this day and age, we got to look at savings elsewhere in the budget and begin to deal with all the other spending that's not, frankly, constitutional like defense is. That's where we have to focus.
Lockwood, real quickly, I gave you an article by John Sopko. John Sopko is the Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction.
Right.
That's given many, many reports. You can go online, any of your listeners, and look up SIGAR, S-I-G-A-R. That's the Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction. He testified that among the many wasted programs he's seen in Afghanistan, that one of the worst boondoggles was to spend DOD, Department of Defense, spent $6 million to buy 9 goats.
Amazing.
I can see people right here in Carteret County thinking, couldn't we use a little bit of that money to do some dredging in Carteret County?
Just a little bit.
9 goats for $6 million.
We're going to go to some callers. I'm going to ask them to be very quick, please, because we got to go to break. Bob in Morehead City, welcome. And again, our guests are Congressman Jim Jordan. I'm going to introduce our farthest traveler and Congressman Walter Jones. Bob, welcome. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Congressman, for taking your time out. Is there no one in Washington that can stop Obama from bringing in these Mideastern refugees and dumping them into North Carolina and Ohio, each having about 6,000 now in the last 2 years? And we don't know where they are and who's supporting them. And the states are going to have to support them in a year or two when the government pulls out.
I'm going to tell you that the majority of people to stop him are just not there. I'm going to give you a quick example before Jim Jordan speaks. In the omnibus bill that we had this past year, the money that many of my colleagues said we're not going to give Obama to bring in the 10,000 refugees from Iraq and Syria. Do you know that the money was there to bring in the 10,000?
How?
Absolutely.
Where did the money come from?
I don't know if it's from China, whoever we're borrowing money from.
Oh, okay. But I mean, how did he was in the appropriation bill?
Yeah, the bottom of his
All right,
appropriation.
Bob, thanks very much for your call. I appreciate that. Ernie in Emerald Isle. Ernie, very quickly. Yes, sir.
Very quickly for Congressman Jones. Walter, I am grateful that you are my representative. We agree on many issues, but the two most important ones are we are so deep in debt we'll probably never get out.
You're right.
And I hope we can, but we may not. And the second one is, why are we pouring our treasure into foreign rat holes and to foreign wealthy governments that don't appreciate us and in some cases hate us? And you are pretty much the only person that keeps on hammering on this issue. And God bless you for doing it.
Very much, and that's the reason that I get criticized when our party will not let us have amendments to cut the OCO funds out of Afghanistan, which is in addition to the $4 billion we spend every month. And we put in $43 billion in OCO funds last year. No accountability. I'm with you, sir. I am sick and tired of taking care of every other country. I thought it was ridiculous today when I heard that Puerto Rico is $17 billion in debt. And they're $17 billion in debt, and they want America, who's $19.2 trillion in debt, to lend them money. I must be crazy. Okay. It's the wildest thing I've ever heard.
Ernie, thanks very much for your call. I appreciate that. We're going to take a quick break on that one. I've got two members of our second hour panel on here, Youth Points, with Emily and Zach. And I'm going to ask them a question here very quickly as they're listening to this conversation. Do they feel the sense of urgency on this issue of national debt? I would be interested in their observations. To our guest, Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio and Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina. You're listening, of course, to Viewpoints here on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240. Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240. We have in the studio, and I thank Bob and Ernie a few moments ago for their calls. If you'd like to call in, we have a few moments left, but I will tell you we've got a lot on our plate this afternoon with our guest, Congressman Walter Jones, 3rd Congressional District, a member, by the way, he pointed out, of the Liberty Caucus, and of course, Congressman Jim Jordan, 4th Congressional District of Ohio, who's traveling with the congressman. They're headed to Cape Carteret for a meeting with the Tea Party here in a few moments. I want to get into that with you, but we also have two of our panelists from Youth Points. We have Emily and Zach here in the studio. And I'm going to start with you, Emily, as the junior. You were hearing this issue of national debt. Does this, and I'm looking for, there is no right answer, but does this in any way resonate with you?
It's obviously an issue, but in a lot of senses, I feel like it's just kind of something that's pushed to the side and not something that's dealt with by a lot of people in Washington.
Zach, what about you?
I was going to say that I think it's been there our whole lives, and we haven't really known a time where there wasn't an enormous debt. Okay. So it's kind of like the monster in our closet, that we know is there, but doesn't really mean anything to us because we wouldn't know what it would be like to live without it.
And we don't know what to do about it either, like on a personal level.
Congressmen Jordan and Jones. Congressman Jordan.
Well, someday the monster's going to come out of the closet.
I know,
that's the point.
But it doesn't. They don't feel it, and they don't see it. And the
middle-class families are feeling it with stagnant wages. I mean, this debt is a drag on our economy.
But the argument is, hey, that's an issue that can be addressed and dealt with a minor tinkering in Washington, D.C.
Well, you need growth. I mean, one of the things that will help is you need to control spending. Certainly, you need to reform all the programs. That you need to treat taxpayers with the respect they deserve. That certainly has to happen. But you got to have growth. Growth solves the problems. I always use, by way of comparison, we Republicans, we like to talk about the Reagan years, and we like to talk about them because they were good years. 1985, first year of Reagan's second term. You know what the annual growth rate was? 7.5%. Today, we just heard this first quarter, we were growing at 0.5%, for goodness sake. So if you want to be able to deal with the obligations we have, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and have the kind of vibrant, growing economy where these young people can get good jobs, you've got to grow at more than 0.5%, for goodness sakes. And that means changing policies so that will help families have higher standard of living, have a better position in life.
Congressman Jones, you have had a mantra. Your mantra has been, I can't tell you, other than a mild disagreement you and I have over the issue of Iraq and Iran. Ever since I've known you, you have, I'm going to use the term, bitched and moaned about the national debt. Is it beginning to resonate in Washington, D.C.? Congressman Jordan obviously gets it, but others and your peers, that has been your I can't think of anything else that hasn't been more consistent.
Lockwood, it has, and it's not. That's why Jim is trying to help me get reelected. He's been traveling the United States for other candidates who promised to be watchful and try to do something about slowing down the debt of the nation. I will tell you that Ron Paul, God bless him, a few years ago, we had the Liberty Caucus, and Ron had a monetary spokesman to come in to talk to us. And the fellow told us, this is 7 years ago, I think the debt was around $14 trillion. And he said that his concern, the monetary expert, that when we hit 21 or 22 trillion, that the dollar will collapse and we will have to begin a new monetary system.
All right.
Now, that would be total chaos. That's when these young people, who I don't expect now, I mean, they're very bright and they got a bright future, but if we don't do our job as members of Congress now to slow down and stop this out of control spending, we will hit 21 or 22 trillion dollars in the next 3 or 4 years.
Lockwood, here's how serious it's getting. Time magazine a couple of weeks ago, front page cover. I mean, I'm not a big reader of Time magazine. Front page cover. They actually went to the expense of personalizing for their subscribers. So it would say "Dear Lockwood," and then it had a number, right? $42,000 some odd dollars, and that number represents what every single American owes. So you talk about how this is now just getting past conservatives in Congress, and people understand when you get to a debt that's bigger than your annual GDP, you're in dangerous land. And when Time magazine goes to the expense of personalizing to their subscribers, and you read the article. It was actually a very conservative perspective from the author of the economist who wrote the article. This is Time magazine.
Congressman Jones mentioned a few moments ago the issue of dredging at Morehead City. We have certain circumstances we're concerned with relative to sequestration and the influence and the importance of the military investment in North Carolina. So Congressman Jones has ostensibly, and Congressman Jordan, have to bring the bacon home. How do you convince Congress? And I say congressmen, senators play a role, but they are not as close to their audience.
But Lockwood, it's not about bringing the bacon home. It's about doing what's constitutionally, what the right thing to do is. Constitutionally, we're supposed to spend your tax dollars and these young people's tax. We're supposed to spend it on national defense and on infrastructure. Okay. Right? We're not supposed to spend it on the 79 different means-tested social welfare programs without any reform, without all the redundancy. Some of those may be needed, but you have to look at everything else in the budget. Of course we got to spend on national defense. We're the United States of America, and the Constitution says that's where we're supposed to spend your first tax dollar. Of course you have to have infrastructure because that's important to economic growth to deal with the overall problem. That makes sense. But our voters say, and families say, but deal with all the other baloney, Jordan. Send someone like Walter Jones there to keep dealing with all the other baloney. That's where we have to focus. But no. Spend on everything and create this huge debt problem we have.
Can we get reform in Washington, D.C., and will it be part of, because the best time to talk to voters is now. Congressman, you've got a delayed election coming around the corner. I want to ask you how it's going on that. Well, after that, we've got the national campaign. Is there a way to get the attention of Congress to really get rid of the chaos, the garbage that's out there?
Lockwood, I think it's going to take the right person in the White House. It's going to take leadership in Congress like a Jim Jordan. That means House and Senate, people who have character, integrity. How
about our speaker?
Well, I didn't vote for him. I think he's a very capable man. Jim can speak for himself. I think he's part of the problem, and will continue to be.
Well, I think Paul has helped on a number of process reforms on how Congress operates, and certainly a compelling spokesperson for Republican principles. But the real test for all of us is we need to put those principles and process reforms into place to create the right policies.
All right, and back to you. I apologize. I wanted to ask about that because I've been wanting to get that question in. But is there a candidate for president, now I'm going to ask the really tough question, who has the best chance of making those reforms?
Well, I want to be fair, and this is not a political answer. It's going to sound like one, but I think Trump or Cruz and Trump, I think they're the kind of men that have already been publicly stating that they are concerned about the growing debt of the nation.
Okay.
So they've made a commitment that, in my opinion, obligates them to do something about it should one or the other get into the White House.
All right. And then final question for you, Congressman Jones. We've got Congressman Jim Jordan here, and I wish we had more time, and I really appreciate Congressman Jordan. Just before we even get to this question, I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to give you a final word as well. You've got a campaign just around the corner, June. It's been a delayed campaign. Has that changed your perspective in the process, not only of campaigning, but in the messaging of your campaign?
Well, Lockwood, first of all, I've still got a job to do for the people in Washington. So we have this week off, so I'm in the district. We have the last week of May, I will be in the district, but the other 2 weeks I'll be in Washington. So my campaign will start mailing people to remind them, the state board's doing the same thing, that we will have an election on June 7th.
Right.
And so that's really about all you can do is get the word out. That's what we're trying to do.
Congressman Jordan, as you were on the hustings with Congressman Jones, let's talk about the number one concern that you and the congressman and you think others, I think I know the answer, but the number one concern.
Well, the debt is huge. We got this terrorist threat out there. That is huge. But I'm also very nervous about what we've seen from this administration when it comes to your civil liberties, your fundamental rights, your First Amendment right to exercise your political speech rights, your free speech rights under the First Amendment, targeted by the Internal Revenue Service, Fourth Amendment liberties, which I think your privacy rights, which are under attack. The founders, in their wisdom, said, yes, we need to make sure we deal with our national security, deal with the terrorist threat that's out there, but we have to do it in a way that's consistent with the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and our fundamental liberties. And so that's another great reason why the voters here in Eastern Carolina need to send Walter Jones back, because he understands the importance of the Constitution and your fundamental rights.
We're going to have one other major collapse here in North Carolina, and that's my prediction here. I'm going to go out on a limb. National health care. Congressman Jones, any comment?
I think that's why if we can get a Republican president and a Republican House and Senate, I think we will do what we can to dismantle the parts of the Obamacare that are just absolutely unreasonable.
Are you not on the health care task force?
I'm on the oversight committee, so we look at all kinds of issues. We got broad jurisdiction. So yeah, look, everything ever said about Obamacare turned out to be false. You like your plan, you can keep it. False. Like your doctor, you keep it. False. Premiums are going to go down. Deductibles are going to go down. False and false. Website's going to work. False. Website's secure. False. Emergency room visits will decline. False. So this is the worst piece of one of the worst pieces of legislation ever put together. Of course, you got to get rid of it, and you have to focus on a model that actually empowers families to interact with their physician and make healthcare decisions there, not some bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., for goodness sake.
Our guests, and I thank them for taking the time to be with us this afternoon, Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio and Congressman Walter Jones of North Carolina.